Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Whitwam Organics Weekly Nursery and Garden Report. My name is David Whitwam, and I am your host. Thank you, everybody who has a chance to join me today. So we're going to be kind of talking about what's going on with the season, where we're at. We're just over the middle of the summer season. I think we have about just under 5 weeks of actual summer left until we are officially in fall. I'm not talking about the weather. I'm talking about the actual day on the calendar. That's important, as well as paying attention to the weather. That's important because of the position of the sun and a lot of decisions that we make on what we're planting and where we're planting it and what we're doing in our garden has to do with the position of the sun and the number of hours of sunlight. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Adjustments that need to be made throughout the year, including your shade cloth and your watering. But before we get into today's topic, and everybody who's watching, if this is your first time watching live, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And everybody else who's in here, please feel free to type into the comments that you're here and say hi, so I know you're here. Hello, everybody who's watching on YouTube, and hello, everybody who's watching on Facebook. So again, thank you, everybody, for joining me. So Nursery Report, over the past 3 weeks. Oh, I'm sorry, by the way, I haven't seen you guys in a little while. It's been just really hectic between a few different things. I was busy doing stuff, taking classes, getting smarters. And then also working on some back-end business stuff. So anyway, out in the nursery, we have, over the past 3 weeks, we've been planting tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. We have also been planting, so those happened a while ago, maybe longer than that. I think it was the last week of July, we got the tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants in. And then this past week, we got all of our squash, melons, and cucumbers. So these are all plants that I would consider to be our warm season crops. So they don't really do so well over the summertime. Now, we do have varieties of some of this stuff that we grow over the summer, but on the broad spectrum, these are all crops that don't really do well here in Florida over the summer. They don't really like the heat, that peak part of the summer, which we're going to be covering today. And they also can't take a frost or a freeze. So I don't really consider them a summer crop, and I don't really consider them to be a winter crop. And so we got the long season stuff, the stuff that takes longer to produce. We got that started 3 weeks ago, and this past week we've been planting the stuff that's a little bit shorter season. Kind of the goal is to have these plants available to plant out in our garden for our fall growing season once the weather turns nice, or even plant a little bit earlier than that so that they're beginning to produce once the weather gets nice. Hello, Penelope from Vermont. I don't know how much this is going to pertain to you, but thank you for tuning in and watching. We're talking about our crazy Florida seasons down here, and it's if you ever move down here, you'll know. I hear this daily. I'm from up north. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So thank you, everybody else. Hi, Anna Maria. Hi, Cecilia. Hi, Christine. Thanks for watching, you guys, and thanks for chiming in. So we planted our squash, melons, and cucumbers just maybe a week ago, just over a week ago. This week, we are planting. Now, that stuff all I minus like pounding rains, that's all stuff that you could straight seed in your garden right now. Not saying it's going to be successful. Sometimes just in that first barely seeding stage, like when the stuff first cracks up before it gets its true leaves, the plants are kind of tender and susceptible to, a little too much sun or not enough water or pounding rains. But if you plant a lot and get lucky, they'll get past that stage and you'll be off to the races. So the bigger plants that, kind of crack out of their seed and get big pretty quickly, those can definitely be straight seeded. So those are your squash, melons, and cucumbers. Now, we really don't we do a little bit. We don't do a whole lot because I try and push people towards seeds. plant beans. Now, again, I'm just talking about what we're doing right now in the nursery. So we're going to be planting a little bit of beans. And now I'm not talking about the long beans. That's a summer crop. I'm not talking about the cow peas. That's a summer crop. I'm talking about your, I hate saying this. I'm going to come up with a better way to say it one day, but your regular beans. I would say what most people in the United States would consider what they see when they go to the grocery store, or the normal varieties that you find just at your regular garden supply shop. So, you know, Blue Lake pole beans, the tender green bush beans, stuff like that. So we're getting that stuff going as well. So right now, basically, we're planting all of our long season, so stuff that takes over 50, 60 days. We planted that stuff a couple weeks ago. You're not too late. You definitely get it all going right now, but it's also time to get that short season stuff planted. If you have the ability to set up a seeding station somewhere that's a little bit protected from the weather, it really opens up the possibilities. Now, what I was getting at is, I don't know if I would recommend this. Remember, we do sell plants, so I got to be a little bit earlier than everybody else. But in the nursery, we've already started our collards, kale, broccoli, cabbage. So those are plants that I would consider winter vegetables, but on the heat-tolerant side of winter vegetables. In other words, all of those things can take a frost or a freeze. They enjoy the cooler weather. It does not affect their flavor to get them started in the heat. And if they can survive, and then once it cools down and they're delicious, you're like way ahead of the game. So you don't really have to wait for it to cool off for that stuff. You can get it going right away. So our collards are already up. Our kale's already up. Broccoli, cabbage. I'm probably missing some stuff, but basically your heat-tolerant brassicas, you can go and get that stuff going right now as well. I have been talking to a few people who have started planting carrots. Now let's get into the garden. So out in garden world, so again, with the tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, the big problem is just the size and the weight of the seeds. So you're really not supposed to plant them too deep. And with the rains that we're getting right now, they can get washed away if you don't have them in some sort of a protection. You know, maybe you can figure out something with a little toilet paper roll, cut it in half, put the toilet paper roll down in the soil. Like if you didn't want to put it in like a special area for seeding, if you wanted to straight seed it in your garden, put them in a toilet paper roll in your garden, right? Like just shimmy it into the ground, almost like those round things that they use when they're pouring cement for posts, for tiers. Push that down in the soil and plant inside that. And that way, at least if you get pounding rain, you know your seed's still right there in that same spot. It didn't like run to the other end of the bed. Because if you're big on seed spacing like me, and you're kind of working out your raised beds with like some sort of square foot gardening, and you've got these guys over here and these guys over here, and you're really planned it out, and we get a pounding rain, and then everything just kind of ends up everywhere. So you can use toilet paper rolls, push them down into the soil, plant your seeds in there, and you don't do anything at that point. I mean, by the time the plant's big enough, the toilet paper roll's falling apart. You don't have to worry about it punching through the bottom like on those cow pots and stuff. And you can straight seed the smaller seeds straight into your garden like that. So that's my tip of the week. So tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants can totally be straight seeded out in your garden right now. I always recommend playing the numbers game. So if you want 3 tomato plants, you're going to probably plant, I don't know, 9. You'll probably use 3 tomato plants. I would use 9 seeds. Wait, three tomato plants. So we're gonna plant 6 spots. 3. So you're gonna use 18 seeds. So you're gonna plant double the plants. So if you want 3 plants, you're gonna plant for 6 plants. And in each spot, so we'll call that a stand, where you want that plant, you're going to put in at least 3 seeds. Okay. And then what that does is, what I found is, if something happens with the weather, or you get a little bug attack or something, basically you're playing the numbers game. And hopefully by the time the weather starts cooperating, you'll have at least 3 tomato plants left. If you have too many tomato plants and you weren't planning on it, seeds are cheap. Time and space is not. Seeds are cheap, time and space is not. So either dig the plants up and give them away, or take scissors and cut them at the ground. I don't recommend, tomatoes are a little bit of an exception, but I don't recommend if in the stand where you put in multiple seeds, if they all come up, I don't recommend digging them up and splitting them up. This is for everything. Okay? Not that I don't recommend. This next thing I'm going to say is for everything. If you are going to try this as a regular practice, whether it's straight seeding your carrots and they all come in too crowded and you're one of those people who can't kill plants, so you dig them up and move them around. Your tomato plants, your pepper plants, whatever the plants are that you're doing this to, I really, really encourage you. So it's not black and white. It's not, did you kill the plants or are they still alive? Oh, they're still alive. It was successful. There's a whole lot in the middle. So you would never know if those plants are underproductive unless you have something to compare it to. So in some of them, do what I'm saying and cut. So if you had 3 come up, cut 2 of them out at the ground so you have the one left. Okay? This is where I'm saying seeds are cheap, time and space is not. So if you had one plant and all 3 seeds come up and you planted them in the same spot and you're saying, well, I'll just plant these somewhere else. If you wanted 3 plants, then plant in 3 different spots, multiple seeds. Seeds are cheap. Most of the time, back when I was just a home gardener, I was, seeds would go bad by the time I used them all. You get so many in a bag. So, why are we hoarding seeds for 5 years when they're not even going to be that viable in the long run? So seeds are cheap. And if they're not cheap to you, listen, if you're on a budget, I get it. I'm not trying to say that they don't cost anything. But compared to time, which you never get back, and space, which we're all limited on, they're cheap. So even if you're on a super budget and $3-4 packs of seeds, and a lot of them is hard for you to pay. So we're not comparing people's financial situations. I'm comparing it to time, which you never get back. So if you pick up those plants and split them up and kill them, and it took you 6 weeks or 4 weeks to get to that spot anyway, you're not getting that 4 weeks back. Okay? So do some, or if you split the plants up and they survive, and you did that for all of them, you don't really know. And they're like, oh man, my tomato plants got blight. Oh man, my tomato plants got nematodes. Oh, these aren't really, I didn't get a whole lot of tomatoes off my plants this year. But if you had 2 of them that you did your little split up game with, and you had 2 of them that you cut at the ground like I'm recommending, you're like, the blight hit these 2 and these are fine. Oh, these got nematodes really early and these are fine. Oh, these weren't really that productive and these are super productive. And this is for all your vegetables. So you won't actually have a controlled for your experiment to know if it was successful unless some of them you do not split up. Okay, so very important. So that was a little, sorry I went off on that little tangent. Let's keep moving forward. So tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants can be straight seeded with care out in your gardens right now. And then you can totally get your squash, melons, and cucumbers going right now as well. Straight seeded, okay? Once plants get their true leaves on them, I have found small plants with their true leaves on them. Again, not when they have their first little seed leaves on them, but once they get their true leaves on them, they're actually more resistant and stronger than adult plants that have already been producing. I've been growing in the nursery, and I've been growing in many gardens every single year, and I will stand by that all day. Smaller plants are more hardy and resilient than larger plants. And if you start paying, have that clanking around your head while you're gardening, and you'll start noticing that all the diseases show up and start on your plants when they get older. I'm not saying that they're impervious, but more often than not, I find aphids on my older plants, not on my younger plants. On my older leaves, not on my younger leaves. Definitely, if it's some kind of plant that is producing some sort of seeded fruit that you're eating, once they get to that stage, that's an extra level of stress, and boom, the problems start occurring. So for me, it's a lot better to get my stuff started early and have them struggle through the difficult times as a young plant. And then once the weather gets perfect, that's when they're starting to produce. So that's why we're going so early on this stuff. Okay. So collards, kale, broccoli, and cabbage. I know for a fact those seeds are real cheap. You get a ton in a bag. But those can also be straight seeded in the garden right now as well. Those seeds are also very tiny, but they're not as light as the tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. So you may or may not want to try the toilet paper roll trick on those, because if you're new to Florida and this is your first, late summer, fall, then you don't know, but we can get a lot of tropical weather into August through September and even in the beginning of October. Typically on the years, so if we either get hit with it directly and then it's wet and muggy and humid, if we get a lot of storms that zip through, but even if they don't hit us, sometimes they can bounce those first few cold fronts. Let's see, you guys are looking at the opposite, so it would look like this way. My camera's opposite, right? So the cold fronts coming from the north west that kind of give us our first cool weather late September to October. If we have a lot of storms, I think this happened last year that missed us here in the peninsula of Florida, but they were still jumping up the Gulf and bouncing those cold fronts off and keeping them from really getting down to us. So it stayed hot a lot later. But I mean, typically it cools off at least where it's comfortable in the mornings, meaning the nighttime temperatures drop. We've lost some humidity out of the air. Typically that happens somewhere between the last week of September, so about right when fall starts. But it can also not happen until the first week of November. Average second week of October. Okay, that's when the weather's going to switch. So our goal with these plantings is to have that stuff very close, if not already in production mode, once that cool weather hits. Okay, so this is all the warm season stuff and all the heat tolerant cool season stuff that you can get rocking and rolling on all that right now. When it actually does cool off, that's when I start planting the winter crops that need it cold. So, some of the lettuces and bok choys, snap peas, snow peas, stuff like that like and need that cooler weather. If you want to anticipate the cooler weather, like let's say you see a cold front coming down, and even though it's still hot now, some of that stuff, if the seeds will still germinate in the warmer weather, you can get an early hop on that stuff as well. Also out in the nursery, I just wanted to take note, we have a ton of Florida native milkweed right now. The plants are looking great. We also have a lot of Florida native flowers. I don't think I can reach any of them, but they're also, they don't have their flowers on them right now, but the plants are looking really good. This is Florida native sand Coreopsis. And then some of our Coreopsis also does, these are 4-inch pots, also has flowers on it right now. We got tons of tropical sage, a pretty good amount of herbs. While I'm turned around, let me go off on another tangent. So guess what I learned? And the thing is, it's like when I learned it, I was like, oh, I think I've heard that. So I have these 2 Jamaican cherry trees, one that's right behind me right now, and another one at one of my school gardens that I installed. I actually did not put 2 and 2 together. I have so much stuff going on that these 2 trees were from the same batch. And both trees, the one here at my house and the one at the school garden, we've been waiting for the cherries to turn red, and they've only turned yellow. I'm like, oh, why aren't these turning red? And I thought maybe I had never seen that before. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, there's a yellow variety. So we've had all of these Jamaican cherries that have just been dropping on the ground that were totally ready. But we've got the yellow variety. Eventually, I'll be propagating off of these trees and we'll have them for sale. Fruit tastes pretty much the same. I actually think that the skin has a little bit less of that bitter flavor to it. I don't know, maybe it's just in my head. But they're definitely just as sweet, just as delicious. And I know these are kind of small, but because this one's in a pot, I'm thinking that might be why. But at the school garden, they're actually, I swear they're bigger than the other Jamaican cherries. Stephanie says, is this the right time to start milkweed from seed? Well, so the native milkweed is flowering, depending on the variety and where you're at in Florida. It either already flowered and seeded, or it's flowering right now and it will seed, or it's flowering now and will be seeding in a little while. All the native Florida native milkweeds, they all need cold stratification to sprout. So, and most of them go very dormant over the winter time. So even if you did some cold stratification on your seeds right now, and forced them and got them to sprout, you probably wouldn't have big enough plants to survive the dormancy over the winter so that they pop back up in the spring. I'm not 100% sure about that. We are actually going to be experimenting with a late season planting of the seeds this year, and we're going to keep them in pots and overwinter them just to see if we can get a hop on our spring milkweed in smaller plants by doing this. So I'm assuming not. I don't think it's going to work, but we're going to try it. I would say, as far as encouraging you on what to do with your milkweed, we have plants for sale. Buy plants and buy seeds for you to start in the spring. Cold stratification, if you're not, it's cold wet stratification that they need. If you're not 100% familiar with that, basically you take like sand or vermiculite and get it a little bit damp, put the seeds in it, stick it in a baggie, put it in the fridge for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever that particular type of seed says it wants for stratification. So you can't necessarily just stick it in the fridge because it needs cold and wet. So you're kind of mimicking what the seeds go through over the winter time. And then we also have in the nursery, we still have some of the summer stuff left. By the way, it's not too late to get some of the like hardcore summer stuff started. That stuff can be grown into the fall as well. So if you're a huge fan of okra and you just can't get enough of it, me personally, I've been eating it all summer. I'm sick of it. But that can be a crop that goes in your fall garden. Okay. I had 2 people asking me about garlic at the same time. So garlic does need stratification, but it is a serious song and dance. There are a few people in Florida who are diehard and they're working on it, working on what varieties, but they're still not really that successful. And it takes a lot of stratification and work. Like the humidity level is important with the garlic, and the exact amount of time that you use the stratification. I don't know all the details. I know enough about it to watch people do it and say, I'm not doing that. So I still stand by that you can't really grow garlic in Florida. I have people tell me all the time, yes, you can. I have people show pictures, but most people I know are just not successful at it. Kenny's here. Kenny's here. So Kenny's one of the people who's been diddling around with garlic, and I would say he is somewhat successful. And if anybody's going to be able to tell us in a year or two what garlic to grow and exactly how to do it, it's going to be Kenny. And then a few other people I know are working really hard at it. Kenny, you're here. Would you say that you're there yet? I mean, for like, say there's somebody, I want to kind of paint a picture. Say someone is not a hobbyist. They're not into experimenting. They just want to do it. They want to be successful. They're new at this. Okay. They're not a expert gardener. Would you tell them that garlic is possible and easy to do? And we can wait for Kenny to pipe in, because that's going to answer the real question to me is whether or not we can grow garlic in Florida. I know Kenny's experimenting with the different types, and also I think he says it right here in the comments, seven varieties. Yes. Okay, so he says yes, that you can grow garlic in Florida. Okay, so Kenny, what variety are you having the most success with? And he said that what he did was storing well too. I'll wait. I'm going to jump back and forth, guys. I'm sorry this might get confusing with my conversation with Kenny about garlic while I go through the rest of the stuff that I wanted to go through. So in our nursery right now, we also have peppers, lots of hot peppers, sweet peppers. They're actually really good sizes. They're like in gallon pots. So Kenny says Creole and soft neck. Well, what do you mean by that, Kenny? You mean Creole is a type of garlic, but soft neck covers a lot of different types. Like, are you saying Creole garlic is a soft neck, or are you saying Creole garlic and all soft neck garlics? Because I thought these were only a few very specifics that you had good luck with. So Creole, Shilla, and Thai Fire. And I'm assuming what you're trying to say there is that those are all soft necks. I think that's what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then also, can you please talk to us a little bit about the varieties I'm growing, varieties in those two categories? Oh, Creole's a category. Sorry, guys. Okay, so Creole. So you have Shilla and you have Thai Fire. Which is a Creole and which one's a soft neck? Or are you just tell me about the ones that you have had success with, not the ones that you are experimenting with. And then also, if you can please pipe in about your cold stratification and humidity process as well. And I'm going to get into our topic. I bet we could probably blend these two things together. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about today is something I think is glaringly obvious, but I'm finding out more and more that people just don't pay attention to this stuff. So I think we all know that the summer solstice is around June 20th, 21st. The winter solstice is December 21st. And then the spring and fall equinoxes are somewhere around the 20th, 22nd of September and March. Okay. Now, the summer, so that's here in Florida. Okay. Let's see, that's south right there. On December 21st, high noon is about 45 degrees up if you're facing south. Okay. The sun rises in the southeast and sets in the northeast. So all day long, the sun is in the southern sky on December 21st. Okay, so I know you guys can read what he's typing if you're on Facebook, but we also have people that watch on YouTube. So I'm going to read what Kenny is saying about these garlics. So Kenny says that Shilla and Thai Fire has been his winners. He has 7 varieties coming in the next 2 weeks. He'll pop them in the fridge in a paper bag and pull them out on Halloween and plant that day. Well, there you go. Kenny, I don't know if you saw that, but Patricia is asking for your source on the Shilla and Thai Fire garlic. Forever. What does that say, Kenny? What did you forever? Oh, that was supposed to be Young. Forever Young Farm is his source. Forever Young Farm. Kenny, if you find their link and you can put it up in the comments, I'll put it up on the screen. So anyway, back to the solstice dates. So December 21st, it's not Young. Forever Young. Okay. Kenny, if you find a link to it and you can put it up there, I'll put it up on the screen. So December 21st, high noon's at like a 45-degree angle, almost, facing south, and the sun rises in the southeast and sets in the southwest. So from where I'm sitting right now, I'm facing south. The sun's over there all day. It rises over here and goes up like that, like really low in the sky, and it sets like over there. Okay. Right now, the sun is coming up almost in the east. It's still a little bit south or north of east, just barely right now. And it goes a little bit north, and then it goes down over there. So kind of I'm sorry, it goes from a little bit north It goes from a little bit north, and then it goes a little bit south when it goes up, and then it kind of curves back around this way. Okay. And just a few weeks ago, it was coming up really far north of east, and high noon was almost straight overhead, and then it was setting. So it makes this arc in the sky like that, right? So right now it's kind of tracking right here. Now, this is the important part, okay? If you got out there and somehow could take a marker and draw a line in the sky, and you traced where the sun was going, okay? Kenny says they're sold out, but we're still going to put the link up. Okay. So if you could get a marker and draw a line in the sky, and you, let's do the winter solstice, and you came out when the sun was coming up, and you drew the arc that the sun actually goes in the sky, right? Which is basically, that's the angle of the sun that your plants are seeing. That is what things are in the way, causing shade, causing shadows, right? And then you did the same thing for the summer solstice, and you drew a line in the sky when it went over. To the naked eye, you're going to be drawing almost the same line from about 4 weeks before the summer solstice and 4 weeks after the summer solstice. You're going to, same thing, about 4 weeks before the winter solstice and about 4 weeks after the winter solstice. So for 8 weeks, the sun is literally in the same position from sunrise to sunset. Okay. So everybody write that down. I'm gonna take it off the screen. If anybody wants me to put that back up, I'll be more than happy to. So now, visibly, that would be if you were actually tracing it with a marker. Visibly, if you were just going out and looking at it, it looks the same about 7 weeks on either side. So right now we're about 8 weeks, I think is what I counted, off of the summer solstice. And just now, finally, the sun is visibly getting lower in the sky. Sunrise is visibly starting to head south. Sunset is starting to visibly head south. Okay? So what does that mean? What that means is that during the summertime, the peak of our summer solstice, I mean, really, like if I were to make the seasons, I wouldn't have summer beginning on June 21st. I would have June 21st being the middle of summer. I don't know why. That just makes more sense to me, right? And then I wouldn't have December 21st as the beginning of winter. I would have that as the middle of winter, because that's really the shortest day of the year. But whatever. I'm not in charge. Thank goodness. So what that means is that whatever you got going on before the solstice, mark that day on your calendar. Okay? So if you're in your garden in end of May, June, and you're like, oh crap, my stuff's getting scorched, I need to put up some shade cloth. Now, if you think you might have been noticing something like a few days before that, and it just took a little while to click in your head, then jump back a couple days. But I want you to mark that day on your calendar, and you're going to count those days to the solstice. Then you're going to count those days again after the solstice. That's probably when you're supposed to remove the shade cloth, or you're going to start having problems. Okay? We are noticing in our nursery right now, I had to reset all the timers. I'm going to have to move the shade cloths over. So over here, we will restart our plugs. I have a 60% shade cloth. Then we have a middle table right here that has a 30% shade cloth. And over here on our outer table where stuff needs, for our stuff that needs full sun, we have a 10% shade cloth. So I'm going to be pulling this one off completely, and I'm going to move this one down here. I'm going to move this one down here. So that basically now we got a 30% shade cloth here. We're going to have the 10% shade cloth in the middle, and then these outer tables aren't going to have any shade cloth on them at all. So we've started noticing just stuff was getting overwatered because I didn't adjust the watering schedule. Well, I kind of looked at, well, I didn't adjust the water schedule and I didn't take the shade cloth down or move it around. Hence, the stuff was being overwatered. So this time of year, it's really important that you're paying really close attention to what's going on with the angle of the sun, the amount of sun that the stuff's getting, how much water it's getting, because that all kind of depends on how much sun it's getting and if it's in too much shade. So it wasn't a coincidence to me at all that at the same time my staff is saying, hey, David, stuff's getting overwatered and we're having some weird mildew issues out here. And I was realizing I didn't pull the shade cloth down and I need to back down the water because the sun's getting lower in the sky. The days aren't as long. The sun's rays aren't as intense. As the sun gets lower in the sky, it's got more atmosphere to come through to get to us. So the sun's rays aren't as intense. So every drop or every minute of sunlight doesn't count the same as during that, whatever you want to call it, 8, 10, 12-week period right around the summer solstice. So that's right when your stuff is getting cooked, right? That's that hill that we got to get over, why a lot of our spring stuff doesn't make it into summer very far. Because as we get closer and closer to that summer solstice, it's just too much. So, but it's not a coincidence. I went to one of my other gardens on Wednesday, and I'm looking at cowpeas that have been doing great for all summer. And I happen to plant them in a spot in the garden that gets a little more shade. It's got some dappled light from an oak tree. Well, when we're at a 14-hour day and the sun's rays are really intense, even through dappled light through an oak tree, that still equals plenty of sunlight for those things. Those are heat-loving, sun-loving plants. Well, now that the sun's getting lower in the sky and the amount of photons making it through our atmosphere are less, and it's got the dappled light, so those are getting hit by powdery mildew. Powdery mildew usually means your stuff isn't getting enough sun. And there's other factors, but it usually isn't getting enough sunlight. That's why you get powdery mildew. So this time of year, it's really super important that you're paying attention to these things. So like, just because it's still summer and still hot doesn't mean the sun's in the same position and your stuff's getting the same amount of sunlight. So contrary to what everybody thinks, because I keep hearing it, plants don't like shade. They like sun. They like as much sun as you can give them without burning them up. Okay, so if you're having problems in the garden and you put up shade cloth, that's not a fix-all for everything. And I've done this experiment over and over and over again, and I wish I could invite everybody to come to the gardens when I'm doing these experiments, just so that they can put it to rest. Okay, I will literally go in the same garden in the spring and even right now, and I will plant romaine lettuce, cabbage, and carrots under a dappled light oak tree where they're protected, and 3 beds over in full blasted sun, I will mirror and plant the exact same stuff. And over again, as long as that stuff is getting enough water, it grows twice as big, twice as fast. Twice as big, twice as fast. So really, you should be pulling your shade cloth down as soon as possible. And right now, it's possible. So, you know, if you can, the only reason I'm not pulling it down completely is because we're starting tiny seedlings in little plug trays, and they do get burned up from the plastic in the plug trays and all that fun stuff. So if you have a seeding operation, but if I was straight seeding this exact stuff right out in the garden, I'd be doing it out in full sun. Again, your only thing that is kind of working against you right now is the pounding rains of these last couple weeks of summer. Okay, so if you have any type of automatic, if you're hand watering and you're just paying attention to what's going on, you're not even going to notice anything except for, oh, during these months, if it's not raining, I'm watering a heck of a lot more. And then as we get closer and closer to wintertime, I don't need to water as much. You know, I would say the months that need the most watering, the months I usually find that need the most watering, whether you're using automatic irrigation or you're hand watering, are like March, April, May. So basically from once it starts warming up and the sun's getting higher in the sky till our daily rains start. And then right when our daily rains stop, sometime in August or September, until the sun gets a lot noticeably lower in the sky if it's still, especially if we have a warmer winter. So typically, I think October and November are pretty dry months, but you don't have to hand water as much as March, April, and May, just because it's not as hot. So definitely, this is a time of year you can't just put on the watering schedule and leave it. So you might be doing a lot of adjusting. One of the things I do is I go out. First of all, I look at my plants. Don't look at your plants in the middle of the day. If they're showing droopiness in the middle of the day, sometimes that's just from the heat, and they're actually closing up their stomata and pushing water down into their roots, which makes them droop. That doesn't mean they need water. Look at your plants in the morning or in the evening once the direct sunlight isn't on them anymore. If they're standing up, they're probably fine. But I stick my finger in the soil down past my first knuckle, and if it's dry, I know you need to water. So that's pretty much it, guys, as far as keeping an eye on this transition period, coming out of summer, going into our fall, winter planting season. If you're new to this or you're from up north, new to Florida gardening, one of the main things I can tell you as a takeaway is you always plant the season in front of the season you're growing. So if you're planting fall stuff, that stuff's planted in the summer. If you're planting winter stuff, that stuff is planted in the fall. You're planting spring stuff, you're planting that in the winter, and so on and so forth. So it's always not a good idea to wait until the weather change for the upcoming season to really get in there and plant the stuff. That's how people end up always being a little bit behind. So that's pretty much it, guys. Does anybody have any garden questions? We're going to cut it short today because I'm dripping with sweat out here. Speaking of the sun moving, my little indoor spot that I like to do these from, this time of year, because the sun's setting over there and the window for it is right there, I can't shoot in that room because it's too bright. So speaking of the sun moving, that's why I've been shooting outside, even though it's miserable outside, because it's just too bright in that room for me to shoot. So about another 2 or 3 weeks, the sun's going to be creeping over a little bit more, and I'll have a nice shadow. It won't be coming straight in that window. Kenny Gill says, can we get a Whitwam printable planting guide? It's coming. I have a pretty decent one that I need to clean up. And then I'm going to be putting something out. It's going to be really general, more talking about the seasons and the types of plants. And then on our website, on each individual plant, we are putting planting seasons and planting times in the product's descriptions. Now, of course, we're doing that specifically for 9B for the Tampa area. The reason being, I know there's not a whole lot of customers out there in that region compared to the whole rest of the country. But you know what? Everybody else talks about their planting zone, all these other seed companies. And I'm going to talk about ours when I'm talking about when to plant what on the website. I'm not going to give it for everybody in all these other zones. So everything is based off of 9B Central Florida on planting time. So on each individual vegetable product that we sell, the planting time and season is on them. If they're not on them, literally somebody's working on them right now. So Jessica, the nursery manager, she's been on maternity leave and she's at home right now working on polishing up the rest of our product description. So it should be in each product in no time. And then let's see. I have a lot of hot weather. I have a lot of the hot weather stuff growing like gangbusters. So that's one of the other reasons why I think it's a good idea for people to maybe set up and invest in some sort of a little seeding area. Because a lot of times, if it's not your summer stuff still doing really well, but it's time to get spring or fall stuff planted, maybe it's going to be fall stuff that you planted. It's time to get winter stuff planted, or maybe your winter stuff is still going. It's time to get spring stuff going, and so on and so forth. So if you want to not pull something out of your garden that's still being very productive, planting the stuff in little cell trays in a seeding station, it can kind of, like, if you think about it, quadruple the size of your garden area, because you're more like growing all of that stuff. It's the first part of its life on your seed tables, and you can even upplant some of that stuff into bigger and bigger pots. And then when you finally have the real estate cleared in your garden, boom, you're putting in entirely big plants, and you weren't spending the money on them. So, I mean, like, I always tell people, if you want to have a good, successful, inexpensive garden that's putting out as much food as possible throughout the entire year, get the gardening thing down pat. Once that's like second nature to you, get into starting seeds on a seed table. It's how you can get really high production out of a very small space. So, I mean, simplicity speaking, like, think of like plants that aren't cut and come again, like head crops. If you're harvesting a head of cabbage and you want more cabbage, like ongoing, you're going to have cabbage growing in different spots and different sizes, right? Well, you can have the same thing in your seed table. You can have cabbage in different sizes on your seed table, so that when you harvest your cabbage, instead of putting a seed in, you're putting in, plants that have already halfway grown through their cycle. So I'm not saying that needs to, but it can be incorporated into what you're doing. It can increase your efficiency. It can increase the use of space. If you get into starting your own seeds, not just straight seeding into the garden, but it really opens up to a lot of the varieties that are available, because a lot of stores don't really sell. I know that was one of the things that lies at the heart of why I started Whitwam Organics, was I was finding all these great varieties and great seeds that did really well for me, but nobody sold them as plants. And I know, as much as I can teach people and preach about starting your own seeds, start your own seeding operation, I get it. There's just going to be a lot of people out there who still want to buy plants, hence why I'm in business. So my oldest daughter told me a long time ago I'm a terrible salesman, because I'm always telling people how to do the right thing instead of being like, well, just buy my plants. We were at a farmer's market one day, and it was like July, and somebody walked up and they were like, how do I take care of the whatever? Because it's always something, it's July, and they're like, something's doing something to my tomato plant. And I was like, well, you really shouldn't be growing tomatoes right now. The proper method of like pest control is to rip them out and plant other stuff that really enjoys the summer. So the next customer comes up, and I was busy with another customer. Next customer comes up, and Julie, if you're watching, I hope you remember this, because I tell this story all the time. It's so funny. I was talking to another customer. Someone else came up and was like, hey, I got tomato growing, and I got, problems with this bug. What should I do about it? She goes and grabs the pesticide that we have that works on that pest. I mean, she wasn't BSing them. And she went, here you go, $15. Took the money. Customer left. She turns to me, the other customer left, and she goes, that's how you sell stuff, Dad. But I don't have it in me. So, like, yeah, I keep buying my plants, but I'm going to always try and get people to go buy seeds, save some money, open themselves up to more varieties, more production. I'm thinking if people are more successful and more productive in their gardens, I'm still going to make the money because I sell seeds. So tit for tat, right? So I've got someone here saying that they're in 9A. Danielle says she's in 9A. The summer stuff, nobody really knows how long it's going to stay hot, whether you're in 9A or 9B. I would say we don't really hit guaranteed, like, okay, it's going to really cool down until you get to 8B. And then, it's not really going to cool down until you get into 10A. I feel like 9A doesn't really cool down that much sooner than us. Y'all just get colder than us over the winter. When it finally does. I mean, y'all get it. Don't get me wrong. It does cool off a little bit quicker than down here in Tampa, like by a couple degrees faster. But I don't think it's enough to say, oh yeah, that wall's coming really soon. Go ahead and pull out your summer stuff and get your your fall stuff going. However, if you've enjoyed it and you're ready to move on to something else, it's not too early to move on to the fall crops. It's not too early to move on. I don't know if you missed the beginning of the video. It's not too early to move on to some of the more heat-tolerant winter greens. So you can either ride that horse till it falls off the cliff, and then you'll be a little bit behind on getting your fall stuff and your winter stuff planted. You can ride that horse until it falls off the cliff and be ahead of the game by starting the stuff somewhere else. You could ride that horse all the way off the cliff. I'm talking about keep those summer plants in until they die and then not be behind by buying plants for me. Or you can rip the stuff out right now and put in fall stuff and winter stuff. So really the choice is up to you. So this is a big flux period right now. I'd say pretty much after about mid-July. I know some of my gardens that I had summer stuff in, we had some problems, and I could have ridden that stuff out until it was dead. But I decided, I was in some of the beds, I was having problems with the wood. It needed repairing. In another bed, we had, we just had a lot of weeds. So I decided to go ahead and cover the beds up, pull the crops out, let the soil rest for a little while. Some other beds we put in cover crops, repaired the wood. So just kind of use this as a time period to really get in there and fix things and get ready for fall, which you can't really do if you're just growing that summer stuff until it completely dies. That's only if you need to, run a digging fork through your bed or repair wood or whatever. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I'll probably say it again. My best tactic for really easy gardening is plant your summer stuff. Like, let's say you have 2 beds, okay? In one bed, plant your summer stuff and your winter stuff. In your other bed, plant your spring stuff and your fall stuff. Okay? So think about that. That summer stuff is going to keep going past when it's time to plant the fall stuff, right? When the summer stuff finally dies, it's time to actually plant the winter stuff. All of the winter stuff. The stuff that likes it cool, the heat-tolerant stuff. I mean, like, you're really never too late to plant collards and kale because they come up quick and they're cut and come again plants. I mean, you can plant collards, kale, broccoli, cabbage like every day between now and March. There's no planting time. It's like plant kale now until March or April. I mean, if you want to be really late on the game. So if you plant all your summer stuff in one bed and then you can wait for it to die and then go immediately into your winter stuff. And then when your winter stuff finally dies, don't get me wrong, your cool season winter stuff, that's going to kind of peter off January, February, maybe-ish. And then your heat-tolerant winter stuff, like the stuff we're planting now, that'll keep going till it's time to plant the summer stuff. In your spring and fall beds, that's really the list is from the same list of crops. In 9A, you're going to have more of that break in between fall and spring than we do here in 9B. Sometimes it just continues on. And it's not a bad break. Those are the plants that tend to have like more issues with like nematodes and soil issues and blights and all types of things. And you need more like crop rotation. So that bed tends to get bigger break periods. So think about this, like you plant your fall stuff in there. And if you're in 9A, maybe we get a bunch of freezes and it gets too cold. So that stuff's all dead, right? But at least you have this one bed over here with now winter stuff in it that's being productive for you. And just wait, just be patient. And then in springtime or late winter, then you put in your spring stuff. And then that spring stuff in that bed is going to grow, do good until like, into summer when it finally, like you're finally ripping out your last pepper plant or your last eggplant or your last tomato plant. Then, you're going to let it sit there until now when you're planting your fall stuff. So fall and spring stuff in one bed, summer, winter stuff in another bed. It really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it because once you start overlapping the summer season with the fall season, and then overlapping the fall season with the winter season, and then overlapping the spring season with the winter season, and then overlapping the spring season with the summer season, that's where, or summer crops, that's where stuff gets really confusing because those seasons and those planting times for those grouping of plants, they severely overlap. So basically your winter stuff can still be growing when it's time to plant your spring stuff. Your spring stuff can still be growing when it's time to plant your summer stuff. Your summer stuff can still be growing when it's time to plant your fall stuff. But what doesn't happen is I'd say in 9B, the only thing that does happen is sometimes your fall stuff is still growing when it's time to plant your spring stuff. So you got to just make a choice, you know, like, oh, do I still want this squash or do I want to switch it up to cucumbers, you know? Or do I want to just keep growing the same thing that I was growing? I personally switch it up. I think a good rule of thumb is to have 2 spring fall beds and 1 summer winter bed. And then, you know, if you're going to plant, anyway, it can get as complex as you want it. But yes, Corey, you missed the garden report again. How's it going, Corey? Thanks for watching and tuning in. If I don't see any other questions, I'm going to say goodnight to you guys. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. As you can tell, we moved it to Thursdays. Hopefully this works a little bit better. I do have my live broadcast on television on Thursday mornings on Good Day Tampa Bay. It's a little 3-minute garden segment. A lot of times I'm just talking about what I'm dealing with in the garden right there. I think this morning I actually was talking about how I'm ripping out the summer stuff and digging out the edges of the bed because I have to do some wood repair. Thank you everybody who tuned in, and hopefully you got a lot out of this. If you're some sort of garden guru, food systems guru, or just a really avid gardener and want to like showcase what you got going on in your yard, consider yourself sort of an expert in sort of areas, send me an email. I'd love to have you on as a guest. And otherwise too, you can send me an email if you're watching these pre-recorded and you'd still like to ask a question. I'd be more than happy to cover your email questions, or if you have a question, you can put it in the comments below. Or if you want your question to be anonymous, you can email it as well. So Corey says, when do you sell the seeds of the month pack? I just want an assortment to plant every month. Corey says this every single time I come on. Corey, I swear the seed of the month club is coming. It's coming. It's coming. Spring of 22. That's probably when I'll start it. I got other big sticks in the fire, and I got to get them out of the fire and get them taken care of first. So pretty much as soon as I'm no longer in this backyard and I'm on a property, that's right, we're moving onto a bigger and better property. We're going to be focusing really, really hard on making sure that we have enough seeds and seedlings for everybody through the internet sales of the vegetables, fruits. But we're also going to be kind of working more with other businesses who are into like landscaping and redoing people's yards with Florida natives and fruit trees. And so we really want to expand our nursery pickings to be able to supply those to other businesses so that they can focus on being more profitable in their installations. So Corey, when I get all that under my belt, I will turn around and start worrying about tweaking and adding more special stuff to the website. But it's on the list, man. It's on the list, I promise. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining me. And I hope you guys have a great night. And if I don't see you or talk to you tomorrow, have a great weekend. Bye.